Well, of course, in a system where there's no security of lives and property, which is one of the fundamental objectives of the government, you can't expect things to be working effectively. There is total collapse, as it's evident in the system today, of security in the country. Not because we don't have competent people to handle it, to man the affairs of the security formations, but because the appointment to the hierarchy or the head of security agents has been politicized by the present administration. So, and you cannot eat a cake and have it back. When you put a round peg in a square hole, you won't expect wonders to happen. However, and also when there's a compromise in the system, even within the security circle, there's a compromise. People who are also aiding the escalation in the security, who are effectively working with the people, with the insurgents, so to speak, or the terrorists, so to speak. Of course, I will use the classical example of what happened, the attack on Kuje Correctional Facility of months ago. Of course, a few days after the attack, I will put the word because no longer it's a common knowledge, which the world has taken notice of, that SSS issued 44 intelligence about the impending attack before it happened. And unfortunately, nothing was done. And eventually it came and passed and happened. So you see a system whereby you can correctly classify that as a connivance on the part of the government. Because government is fully aware about that this is about to happen, and they didn't do anything to forestall it. So that's a connivance on their part. There's a conspiracy on the part of the system, so to ensure that happened. So, and to place it in a proper perspective, if there's no conspiracy on the part, at least let me kind of exonerate the SSF for the fact that there was a report, intelligence they issued, running to 44 times, which was not acted upon by the relevant security agents. So, assuming that that is correct, which hasn't been debunked by the federal government, in a Senate climb, the head of other security agents should have been unilaterally resigned without any further prompting, without being dismissed, without being asked to do so. But they still have them today, managing the affairs of the police, the affairs of the military, the affairs of the NIA, and all whatnot. So, and as I speak to you, no step has been taken to punish those who were involved. And no report has been issued. No committee, no investigative panel has been issued to investigate what happened, because the government is part of this, part of the conspiracy. So, and of course, when you are seeing what is playing out, you can't expect effective justice delivery. And it is worse still when these people are being remanded by court. Most of them are being remanded by court order. So, and most of them are involved in heinous crimes, like those who are involved in terrorism offenses. Top Boko Haram fighters were apprehended and brought to court and they're facing trial. Now they've been let off the hook through that attack. So even the lives of those who have testified during the proceedings are in danger. This is one of the situations that has been created by the development, by that attack. Let me give you an example. I believe that was one of the cases we handled in the past. Some people were arrested because they were involved in offenses of murder. So some of them are learned, escaped in the custody. So if someone has given evidence during the proceedings, probably evidence to show that they were involved in proof of the case, the lives of those who have given evidence in the case are in danger as I speak to you. So these are these are consequences of the attack, and a successful attack on the Kuje Correctional Facility. So, and also the effect of it on the judicial process. And government, I can effectively tell you and correctly tell you that government is part of the process. And it happened because of their inaction. It happened because they were aware of that before it happened. And it happened because they wanted to happen.
Going forward, so far, sir.
Thank you so much. Of course, you know that Nnamdi Kanu's case is a political matter. Nnamdi Kanu is a political prisoner. He's here today in solitary confinement, custody of the SS, not because he committed an offense into law. It's because the government wants him to be there. Of course, as a matter of fact, I will say it without any fear of ever, because he's being kept here by the government. And we're doing all we can to explore the judicial process to ensure that he's freed. When we file an application for his bail, first of all, let me start from the manner in which he was brought into the country. He was abducted in Kenya and the extraordinary rendition to Nigeria in clear violation of extant international laws and even Nigerian law. Like, for instance, Section 15 of the Extradition Act 204, even the Nigerian law also forbids abduction of fugitive in that manner, and also extradition and being extradited in the manner in which Nnamdi Kanu was done. So, and there are consequences for that effect in violation of that law. Even the current Terrorism Prevention Act classified such act as act of terrorism on the part of the state. When a state breach violates an international law which a party it's party to, then the case can be sanctioned, cited for violation of that Terrorism Prevention Act of 2022. It's contained there at that section, percent 6 of I can't remember the section, but it's an act of terrorism on the part of Nigeria state to abduct Nnamdi Kanu in Kenya and extraordinary rendition him to Nigeria. So in doing so, it has clearly violated relevant sections of the international laws and of which Nigeria is a party to. So, however, we file an application when they file about 5-count charge against him. We file an application challenging the competence of the court to proceed with the hearing, and also challenging the manner in which he was abducted and brought to this country. So, when the application was right for hearing, the federal government further amended their charge and filed 7-count charge against him, which was also challenged. So we also filed an application to challenge the decision of the court to hear that to proceed with the trial, because the court apparently lacked the decision to attend the charge. So on the grounds which we have also brought to the attention of the court. So a day before the matter was scheduled for the hearing of application, challenging the decision of the court to hear the charge. So they amended their charge to 15-count charge. So to forestall the hearing of the application and possibly delay the proceedings. So, and we come back. Went back and also filed a fresh objection to the 15-count charge. Even the 15-count charge was worse than even the 7-count charge they filed before. So, which the court had, and they consequently struck out 8-count out of 7-count charge. And we look at the ruling of the court and also of the firm view that even the 8-count charge struck out by the court is same in form, content, and facts with the 7-count remaining charge, and went to Court of Appeal to challenge the remaining 7-count charge. So when appeal was filed against that decision, we also filed an motion for stay before the lower court, which the court obliged and asked us to go to Court of Appeal and conclude the appeal and come back. So as it stands today, the matter is coming up on the 11th of October 2022 for hearing. Thankfully, the federal government have filed their responding brief to our appeal, to our appellate brief file, and we have replied. So the coast is clear for the hearing of the appeal on that 11th. So obviously, and from the way I think, I've done an application to the court requiring Nnamdi Kanu to be present in court on that day, and will be in court. So it's a matter of public interest. It's a matter of international concerns, because this government have no respect for the rule of law. They have no respect whatsoever for the rule of law. We are talking about someone who is agitating, who is exercising his right to self-determination as externally provided under relevant laws and even under our laws. So, and you're arresting them, killing them. Anybody cited as member of IPOB, you arrest the person, kill them. But those who there are those who has the powers to carry AK-47, go to villages, towns, and kill without being arrested. And when the issue about the illegal position of firearms is raised about the conduct of Fulani herdsmen, Mietianas and Co, they will tell you that the guns being the AK-47 being used in self-defense. So these are the problems we have in this country. And as incidentally, this people has been classified as the first most dangerous organization, the World Terrorist Index today. And nothing has been done about them. So look at all over the place. Look at the Plateau State, Benue State, Plateau, the entire Southeast has been invaded by this group. And they're killing us and nobody unchecked. So, and in some cases, they've been aided by security agents to kill and being protected. Some of them has even gone into start kidnapping. I had accounts given by the prelate of Methodist Church sometime in the past about how he was kidnapped by those identified as Fulani herdsmen. And also, if you listen carefully, you observe that his account suggests that some military men were also indicted from the account. So, and in the course of the investigation, 4 or 3 of the military soldiers were arrested. I heard about it. Where are they today? It has been made public. No statement was issued by even the police or the SSS or the state or the government or the federal government. So this is what is playing out. So it's a dangerous, it's a terrible situation. So, but I believe that there is no two ways about it. Nnamdi Kanu has committed no offense to law, and he must be released. Thankfully, the United Nations Working Group or United Nations Arbitrary Detention also issued a communication few weeks back, directing the federal government to release Nnamdi Kanu unconditionally and tender apology, and also pay reparation account of the gross violation of his fundamental rights. So, and that communication has been soundly served on the federal government. So we are still awaiting, because they were given timeline within which to ensure the compliance is reported to them. So, and which hasn't been acted upon by now. And they are in receipt of this communication from UN, awaiting sanction. So this will tell you the level of decay in the system, level of disobedience to rule of law. And so thank you so much. You know the incident happened precisely on 6th of June 2021. That day I came back to my town, my home. I traveled to the village, and that day for a very important meeting, stakeholders meeting. So I don't know, somebody must have told them I came around. Because if actually there was any genuine intention or if there's anything they're investigating any matter, they will have called this is my office, they will have called me on phone and said, Ejiofor, investigating the matter, come to the office and see us. But such didn't happen. They came to my village. I was at home. That was at about 2 a.m. in the morning, 3 hours of the night. They came and I was sleeping upstairs. And of course, everything is on the camera. Of course, the camera is on the CCTV footage. My PA was killed right in my place. And you can see my domestic staff never resisted arrest. They were arrested and taken away. So, and we took steps to communicate, petition the relevant security agents, the state security services, the military, the police, and also the civil defense. None of them investigated that petition before we went to court. Of course, court on the 22nd of June gave judgment in our favor. So granted apparently all our reliefs and directed the state security agents, the agencies indicted in the process, I mean the military, the SSS, and also the police, to identify their personnel who were involved in that data act and accordingly sanction and prosecute them. So, and also directing them to release my wards who were abducted. But the funny thing is that when this thing happened, I took steps to visit the relevant security agents who were involved in that bloody onslaught in my home. So I went to the police, I went to the SS, I went to military, so in search of my wards. So incidentally, I discovered that my wards were first of all briefly detained at first CID, Abuja here, before being transferred to DSS headquarters Abuja. And they were all denying. So until when I gathered enough evidence to show they are being in custody of the SSS, and I wrote to the GSSS requesting him to release my boards who were there. And if they have committed an offense into law, they should charge them to court. I'm not afraid of going to court. Charge them to court. So, and this thing happened on 6th of June, and 1 week thereafter, Iboho's house in Ibadan was invaded by the SSS, where they also encountered resistance, and people were killed. And those people that were arrested, about 27 of them have been released long time ago, since last year. So I was asking, what offense have I committed? If these guys have committed an offense to law, charge them to court, let me come there and defend them. And they were denying having them in their custody. So, but incidentally, I have had other facts which I presented to them. Because one of them made contact with one of my clients being detained there. And he introduced himself to him as my boy. And one of them also passed a message to one of the detainees that was released to that he was being detained there. So why denying? Why denying? And my PA, Samuel Okoro, was killed, taken to somewhere in Nene, a national government of Anambra State. The body, my car, they were stolen that day, and the body was burnt, set ablaze. So that will tell you the level of wickedness of man on earth, the inhumanity of man on earth. So that's where they have strength. But when it comes to confronting the real terrorists, they run away from Sambisa Forest, run away from the battlefield. But when it comes to invading civilian homes, to kill innocent and armed people, they will have the strength to do that. So as I stand today, they have not complied. But I'm waiting for them because I know that between now and October, I'll make sure that I'll take certain steps, judicial steps, to ensure that I lock the accounts of all the security agents and they will no longer pay salary until when my lawyers, my staff are released. I'm taking serious steps. I will not discuss the detail here, but I know between now and October, you'll start hearing things. I've written letters to them. I've written to the military. I've written to the police. I've written to the DSS. In the case of DSS, I notified about the judgment, requesting for release of my boys unconditionally. Till date, they will not comply. And they received, I received of my letter.